All right. So today I'd like to talk about my thoughts on value in fantasy football. And I like thinking about fantasy football and using the more digestible theory behind fantasy football and then extending it to other things in real world land. But anyway, like my thoughts on value, as per the title of the video, is pay the piper. So like one of the things that we talk about we when we listen to the pundits and is value. And I want to go out and I want to get the most value I can for players. And that's the in my mind, it's the wrong way to view how to deal with fantasy football. What we should be doing is we should be properly evaluating players based off their risk and their upside, and then that's how they should be placed, say from an objective ADP standpoint. Now, there's going to be a heavy amounts of subjectivity when we start arguing about who's got more upside than this guy and who's got more risk than that guy. But at the end of the day, like what we're looking for is that upside because I was just thinking about this with Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, if you take him at the 101, has zero upside. If he finishes as the wide receiver one overall in the fantasy MVP, he did what he was supposed to do at that pick. Um, we're also taking him at the 101 because if he finishes at the wide receiver three, more than likely he's still relatively been what we expected him to be at the 101. Like that is the inherent risk of Justin Jefferson is he will not tumble too far down the ranks of where we take him at. Um, but then when we go through and I'm just going to see if I can find a guy. I really liked Nick Chubb this year. He's going at 13th overall on Underdog. On ESPN, I think he's ranked 18, which means that he's got even more value. The chances of Nick Chubb finishing as there's a realistic chance that he can finish as the RB1 overall. And then when we look, he's the running back 4 on Underdog. I think that's probably a little high to where he's actually going to finish. On ESPN, he's going to finish as the running back 8, which I think is a little low. I think we could probably make the argument that he's going to be about 5 or 6 because I think he finished last year at 6. So the value on Nick Chubb is that we could get him as the he could be the 101. He could be a better pick than Stephon, or excuse me, than Justin Jefferson. But once he starts tumbling down the board, obviously if you can get him outside of say the top 20, then that's a phenomenal pick because of the upside that the guy has. And the chances of him being anything worse, and I'm talking like worst case scenario, than a high end running back 2 are relatively slim. So going back to how we should value Nick Chubb is if I like Nick Chubb and I do this year, then I have to be willing to overpay what his market value is in order to put him on my roster. I mean, I'm not saying that you should take a guy in the first round that has an ADP in the 7th, but you have to definitely start thinking about planting your flag on a guy that's in the 3rd round, that you might need to take in the first because you think he's got that type of upside, depending on where you're drafting. I mean, if he's a guy going in the 3rd, I could probably snag him in the 2nd, and that's probably a much safer way to take it. But overall, the idea is like you have to properly evaluate the players. Like last year, your Josh Jacobs, and the year before that, your Cooper Kupps. You have to properly evaluate these guys, and that proper evaluation is going to lead you to need to necessarily overvalue them relative to your opponents. So everybody that's talking, if you listen to any pundits talk about like best value or waiting to get guys later in the draft, I need to get the cheapest piece of this offense. No, you need to go out and you need to select the guy that has the pathway to that upside, and you need to appropriately value them, which means that you're going to have to value them at least a round earlier than everybody else. And those are the guys that you need to go out and get. So another guy I like this year is Justin Herbert, going at roughly about he's going lower. Obviously, ESPN is for it's more casual leagues. Underdog is a money league. Justin Jefferson is take that off. Justin Jefferson is going roughly quarterback 7 with an ADP of 53. Now, I think that's roughly in line with probably where he should go. But if I really want Justin Jefferson, if I really want to put my money where my mouth is, I'm probably going to have to beat his ADP, probably even go as far as to take him ahead of Justin Fields as quarterback 5, or excuse me, quarterback 6. And that means I'm likely in a lot of leagues going to be taking him as a late 4th, early 5th round draft pick in a lot of leagues, because I have to make sure I have this guy if I believe in him. If I don't believe in him, then why am I taking him at his ADP of 53? I have to be able to tell myself, if I'm taking him at 53, why didn't I take him earlier? Because if I don't really like Justin Jefferson, I can play the game and go, oh, look at the value that I got at the ADP of 65, because in my magical draft, he fell to me in the next round. I mean, those are the things I have to think about. And again, this is why guys fall in drafts, is you have to think about why other people didn't draft them earlier. These are, most people in your leagues are not playing in such a capacity where they're thinking about, like, how can I help the next guy out by letting him fall? Guys who have warts for a reason. And as I was talking to my co-manager in one of my leagues, like in the ESPN league, I don't think there's a guy without a wart until you hit Nick Chubb at 18 overall. I don't want to take any of the guys above that because I think they all have warts. And in your fantasy rankings, when we take this off and we just look at everybody, it's the same thing. I don't particularly think there's a guy without a wart until we get to Nick Chubb at 13. Now, some of the other guys like Austin Eckler, I can kind of make the argument for at 7 being less warty than some of the other guys, but I'm paying such a substantial value for Austin Eckler, and that's in a snake draft league. My main money league is a auction league. So the value that I would spend on Eckler is just not worth it to me versus going up and getting Chubb. So if I have the 8th overall pick in a snake draft league, yeah, you better believe that I'm thinking Nick Chubb, and I can pull up Fantasy Pros. Fantasy Pros has Nick Chubb roughly going in as the 8th overall pick. But again, in that league, if I have to go up and I have to take Nick Chubb as the 8th overall pick, I have to think to myself, is it worth drafting this guy at the peak of his value? Is there any more blood to squeeze out of that stone? And I'd have to think about that in that league, because I'm drafting guys based off their potential upside. And guys like Travis Kelce, if you take Travis, we talked about this yesterday. If we take Travis Kelce as pick 6 or above, he has to pay off on that pick, because there's nothing left to get out of him if he doesn't pay off. Like, there are other guys, and when I'll pull up good old Keenan Allen is another guy I like, and where is he? Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley in underdog leagues is going too high. The chances as wide receiver 16, which is probably around the mid range of what he's going to finish at, but 28th overall, 29 overall is probably way too high, because that means he's 100% going to be a top player. And I don't think he's going to be 100% going to be a top 30 player. And I don't see any way he finishes a top 30 player, because traditionally, we're going to have a whole bunch of running backs that do running back things. And we're going to have quarterbacks that have cheat codes that stay healthy. And then we're going to maybe have a tight end that goes up and challenges Kelce. And all of a sudden, he's no longer the 29th, 29th most valuable player in the league. Same thing with Amari Cooper. We see there at wide receiver 17. The chances of him actually jumping up into the top 10, top 5 as a wide receiver does not make him worth the 32nd pick. He will do nothing to help me win. He's going to do nothing to help me lose, but he's going to do nothing to help me win. And a guy like Deebo Samuels that I can get around that range, I like a little bit more, because there's a possibility that he will help me win. There's also a possibility at that price that he's going to help me lose. And that's baked into why he has an ADP of 33. So, like, if I really wanted a Deebo Samuel, I jump up to pick 23 and go get Deebo Samuel. I don't really want Deebo Samuel. So he would be a guy that I would be really inclined to be taking if he falls another round to, like, say, 43. All of us would. But I'm just saying, like, in this case, like, we have to be willing to pay the piper for the players that we think are going to do the things that they did. Again, like, who do I think is this year's Josh Jacobs? I have to be able to identify that player and go take him a round or two early than what he was, or than what he's being valued at. And I have to be able to plant my flag on that guy and go get him. Any guy that I'm drafting that I'm just like, oh, this guy's good enough at where I'm drafting at, is probably not going to win me that league. because there's a reason why I didn't pick him the round before, and there's a reason why no one else did. So that's just kind of my thoughts on value and how to win your league, you have to actually be able to take the chances that you need, the risk in order to have it pay off down the line, which means you have to think differently than your opponents. You have to draft differently than your opponents, and you have to be able to properly assess value heading into your draft to know who you need to overvalue and take at picks. And then again, like as I'm building my fantasy strategy for my co-managers, the reality of it is you can narrow down the amount of players that you will take in a draft to probably about 2 dozen guys. Period. Doesn't matter if it's snake or auction. You're going to have the requisite information to go in there and go like, this is the guy that I'm going to win or lose my draft on. So anyway, that's about all we got for today. I'll think about something and talk about it tomorrow.